I thought I'd seen it all when it came to HOA drama, until Karen Whitmore entered the picture. As the self-appointed president of the Sunset Ridge Homeowners Association, she treated our quiet suburban neighborhood like her personal fiefdom. What began as a simple disagreement over landscaping spiraled into her demanding that I pay her personal electric bill and calling 911 when I refused. It started 3 months ago, right after I moved into what was supposed to be a peaceful, well-kept community. The homes were charming, the streets were clean, and the HOA fees seemed reasonable enough. What I didn't realize was that Karen had been running the association like a private monarchy for 5 years, unchecked and unchallenged. The rest of the board had long since given up trying to rein her in. The first red flag came during my initial walkthrough. Karen showed up at my front door holding a massive 3-inch binder full of rules, none of which were in the official HOA documents. She stood there in her perfectly ironed khakis and a crisp polo, clipboard in hand, and announced she'd enhance the community standards during her presidency. Now, as you'll see in Section 12.4, she said, flipping through pages like a drill sergeant, lawn maintenance must be performed every Saturday between 8 o'clock and 10 a.m. No exceptions. I personally inspect every yard on Sunday morning. I raise an eyebrow. The HOA documents just say lawn care should be done regularly. There's nothing about specific days or times. Karen's smile grew tight. Well, I've improved those outdated guidelines. These rules are for the betterment of our property values. That should have been my cue to start documenting everything. But like a fool, I figure I could handle one overzealous HOA president. I was wrong. The real problem started when I hired a landscaping company to install drought-tolerant native plants in my front yard. I'd done my homework, obtained all the necessary city permits, reviewed the HOA's covenants, and made sure everything was in full compliance. The California poppies and lavender bushes were beautiful, eco-friendly, and most importantly, legal. The next morning, Karen stormed up to my property, looking like she caught me burying toxic waste. "What do you think you're doing?" she snapped, pointing an accusatory finger at the garden. "Installing native plants," I said, holding up my copy of the HOA documents. The covenants say drought-resistant species are allowed. These meet every requirement. She whipped out her ever-present clipboard. "Those rules are outdated. I've created new landscaping guidelines, and all changes now require pre-approval. You need to remove these and replace them with the approved turf grass." "Show me where those new guidelines were adopted by the board." I replied, calm but firm. Karen's eyes narrowed. "I am the board. I make the decisions here. And I'm telling you those plants need to go." That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with a rule enforcer. I was dealing with someone who believed she was the law. Things only got worse from there. Over the next few weeks, she began leaving daily violation notices on my door, each one more bizarre than the last. I was cited for leaving my trash cans out 30 minutes too long, for parking in my own driveway during non-approved hours, and for having curtains that were allegedly the wrong shade of white. Each notice came with escalating fines that had no basis in any official document. When I stopped responding to her imaginary penalties, Karen doubled down. She started coming by multiple times a day, snapping photos of my house from different angles, and leaving long, rambling notes accusing me of continued defiance. But the breaking point? That came when I opened my mailbox to find a bill for $437.62. Not an HOA fee, not a fine. It was Karen's personal electricity bill from Pacific Gas and Electric. Attached was a sticky note. "Your noncompliance has forced me to work extra hours managing your violations. You owe me for the additional electricity used in my home office." I actually laughed out loud. The sheer nerve was almost admirable. Somehow, Karen had convinced herself that her obsessive behavior was my responsibility, and that I should literally pay for it. Apparently, I was expected to compensate Karen for the electricity she'd burned while obsessively harassing me. That afternoon, I knocked on her door, bill in hand. She answered wearing rubber gloves and holding a spray bottle, clearly in the middle of one of her compulsive cleaning marathons. "I think you accidentally put this in my mailbox," I said, holding up her electric bill. Her face lit up like she'd just won a lawsuit. "Oh, no," she said sweetly. That's intentional. As I explained in my note, your repeated violations have created significant extra work for me. I've spent hours documenting your infractions, researching penalty structures, and corresponding with city departments. My home office electricity usage has gone through the roof. I just stood there, momentarily stunned by the mental gymnastics it must have taken to turn her obsessive behavior into a financial invoice. Karen, I said carefully, you can't charge homeowners for your personal utility bills. That's not how HOA management works. She waved off my objection, entirely unfazed. According to my calculations, you owe me for 3 months of elevated power usage, plus a processing fee to cover the administrative burden. Payment is due within 10 business days, or I'll have no choice but to pursue legal action. I'm not paying your electric bill. I said flatly, this is harassment and it needs to stop. Her expression snapped from smug to ice cold. We'll see about that, she muttered and slammed the door in my face. I should have known she wasn't going to let it go. What I didn't realize was just how far she was willing to go to enforce her imaginary authority. 2 days later, I was working from home when I heard the unmistakable sound of sirens rolling into the neighborhood. I looked out the window to see a police cruiser pulling up in front of my house. 2 officers stepped out. Right behind them, Karen emerged from her house across the street, practically vibrating with anticipation as she rushed to join them on my porch. I opened the door before they could knock. Afternoon, officers. Is there a problem? The older one, a calm-looking man probably in his 50s, checked his notepad. We received a report of theft of services and refusal to pay legally mandated fees. The complainant says you owe money to the Homeowners Association and have refused to pay. I glanced over at Karen, who was standing just behind her with her arms crossed and a smug little smile creeping across her face. I'm fully up to date on my HOA dues, I said. My last payment cleared last week. That's not what this is about, Karen cut in eagerly. He owes me $437.62 for additional administrative work caused by his repeated violations. My home office electricity usage has spiked. I've had to manage his case extensively. He's refusing to pay. That's theft of services. The younger officer blinked. Ma'am, are you saying he owes this money to the HOA? He owes it to me, she clarified, like this somehow strengthened her argument. Personally, for the extra hours I've had to spend working on his violations. I even had to run the air conditioner longer. The 2 officers exchanged looks, the kind that say, yep, we've got a live one here. The older officer cleared his throat. Ma'am, we can't arrest someone for refusing to pay your personal electric bill. That's a civil matter, not a criminal one. Karen's face turned a deep shade of red. But he's stealing services. I've done administrative work, and he's refusing to compensate me. Did he request this administrative work? The younger officer asked. Well, no, she admitted, but did he sign anything agreeing to pay you for it? Not exactly, but... Then this is a private billing dispute, the older officer said, cutting her off. If you think someone owes you money, you'll need to take it up in small claims court. We're not here to enforce unofficial invoices. I watched in real time as Karen's fantasy crumbled. She had clearly believed the police would march up to my door and drag me out in handcuffs over a PG&E bill. But I'm the HOA president, she protested, her voice rising in pitch. I have the authority to assess penalties. Being HOA president, the officer replied with barely restrained patience, doesn't give you the right to bill residents for your personal expenses. If you continue making false reports to emergency services, you could be charged. Once the officers left, Karen just stood in my driveway, staring at my house in disbelief, like she couldn't fathom how her plan had failed. I watched from behind the blinds as she finally turned and stomped back to her house, muttering angrily to herself. I hoped that would be the end of it. But Karen's public humiliation only fueled her need to reassert control. The following week, Karen cranked up her harassment to absurd new heights. She began flooding my door with multiple violation notices daily, each one more ridiculous than the last. She accused me of aggressive landscaping choices intimidating neighbors, displaying non-approved outdoor furniture, and even maintaining a driveway that reflected sunlight disruptively. The fine she invented grew outrageously steep. $500 for environmental noncompliance, $750 for architectural insubordination, and $1,000 for willful disregard of community harmony standards. When I kept ignoring her fabricated penalties, Karen unleashed what she probably thought was her ultimate weapon. She called 911 again. This time, she claimed I was destroying community property values through malicious noncompliance, demanding my immediate arrest for grand theft of neighborhood equity. The same two officers showed up, but their patience had worn thin. "Ma'am," the older officer said firmly, "this is the third time this month you've called us over civil disputes with your neighbor. We've explained these are not criminal matters, but he's causing thousands in damage to our property values." Karen insisted. "That sounds like vandalism or property destruction," the younger officer said flatly. "Having plants you don't approve of isn't vandalism, and property values aren't community property someone can steal." That's when I decided enough was enough. Karen had clearly lost all grip on reality, and her relentless harassment was making my home unbearable. I documented every violation notice, every made-up fine, and every interaction. It was time she faced real consequences. The next morning, I filed a formal complaint with the state's Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOA operations. I also lodged a harassment complaint with the local police and sent a certified letter to every homeowner in the association exposing Karen's unauthorized rule changes and her attempts to collect personal payments from residents. The response was swift and devastating. Several homeowners admitted they'd been silently suffering under Karen's arbitrary rules and fines, but were too intimidated to speak out. Until now. Within 2 weeks, a revolt had formed. Enough homeowners signed a petition to call an emergency board meeting and a vote of no confidence in Karen's leadership. The Department of Real Estate launched an official investigation into her unauthorized rule changes and fee collections. The emergency meeting was held on a Tuesday evening at the community center. Nearly every homeowner showed up. Karen arrived, looking confident as ever, clearly believing she could talk her way out of it. "I don't understand why everyone's so upset," she began, clipboard and binder in hand. "Everything I've done is for the betterment of our community. These enhanced guidelines maintain our property values and neighborhood standards." One by one, homeowners stood to share their stories. Mrs. Peterson from Oak Street had been fined $800 for insufficiently cheerful garden decorations. Mr. Rodriguez received violation notices for parking his work truck overnight in his own driveway. The Johnsons were cited for letting their kids' toys remain visible in the backyard for more than 2 hours a day. As the stories piled up, Karen's face paled. She kept interrupting to defend her unnecessary rules, but her explanations only made her seem more delusional. The final blow came when I stood up and read aloud her electric bill demand, including how she called 911 twice to try to have me arrested for refusing to pay her personal utility costs. This is what happens when someone loses sight of their actual authority. I concluded, Karen has turned HOA management into a personal power trip. It's time for it to end. The vote was overwhelming. Karen was removed from the board by 43-2, with only herself and her next-door neighbor, Mrs. Hartwell, voting in her favor. But the real consequences were just beginning. The Department of Real Estate's investigation revealed Karen had violated multiple state HOA regulations. She created unauthorized rules without board approval, attempted to collect illegal fees, and misrepresented her authority to residents. Her penalties were harsh: a $15,000 fine for regulatory violations plus $5,000 for each homeowner who'd paid her unauthorized fees. 7 families had actually paid some of her bogus fines over the years, bringing her total penalty to $50,000. Karen was also banned from serving on any HOA board in the state for 10 years and ordered to pay restitution to every affected homeowner. When the agent read the penalties aloud at the follow-up meeting, Karen went white as a sheet. $50,000, she whispered, barely audible. "I don't have that kind of money. I was just trying to help the community."